What's going on, Team Killchain here, and today we're going to be looking at macros. So these bad boys aren't the things that I track to be less of a fat piece of shit, but rather the in-game macros that are going to help your gameplay improve dramatically. So I'll obviously be slanting all of this mainly based on the warrior. However, we will run over some general ideas of how macroing actually works and give some examples with other classes as well to help you guys, no matter which particular class you're going to be running it on. It'll give you some useful tips. However, like I said, I main a warrior, so most of these are going to be for the warrior. I mean, come on, they're the best class anyway, right? This one's for you, Topher. Whoa. I know some of you guys are going to be like, I don't give a shit about your stupid fucking video. Just give me the macros. So, yes, down in the description below, just copy and paste to your heart's content. Sweet, so they should all be gone. What they don't know is that one little letter or symbol is out of whack for each one of those macros, which means they ain't going to fucking work. Serves them right for battling on the video.
Good, fuck them.
So now that we're in game, to bring up the macro menu, we can hit escape, and just below edit mode, you've got macros. Alternatively, you can also type /macro in the chat, and that'll bring up your macro menu as well. You have two tabs. So we've got the general macros tab, which literally has way more slots available to it. However, the character specific section is only a 3x6 grid, which means you only get 18 slots. Typically, you're not going to need more than 18 slots anyway. However, if you do any sort of PvP or arenas specifically, you're going to probably end up using the general macros tab. There's a lot of crazy PvP macros where it's like at target, enemy arena, enemy number 1, arena enemy number 2, that kind of thing. And they have literally 3 interrupts, all for each individual enemy in the 3v3 bracket, for example. Now, first things first, we will have how to make a new macro. Cool. You've got this lovely section here. Don't worry, you're not going to need to filter through every single icon in the game to find the right one for your thing. That's what the question mark is for. You'll notice here real quick, if I hit the Blood Rage icon, we're just going to call it test, but then go show tooltip. So hashtag show tooltip is your go-to for any sort of give me information, just like it was an ability, which is important. You obviously want to be able to see what your actual macro is doing and what it's currently, what stage it's at, if it's a multifaceted macro. So we go /show tooltip or hashtag show tooltip slam. Now you will see that the icon is still Blood Rage, but when I mouse over it, it shows the tooltip for slam. That's really good. That's what we want. However, you'll notice that it's going to be better when the icon actually reflects what our current macro is actually going to do for us as well. So when I hit the question mark, you'll see the icon immediately changes to the correct slam icon. So not only is the tooltip showing the correct ability, but also the icon as well. So at a quick glance, you'll be able to see what it's going to cast. Likewise, if I then turn around and say Bloodthirst instead of Bloodthirst, I can't spell, instead of slam, hit save, and it immediately updates to the correct icon whilst also showing the correct tooltip. Perfect, we get how that works. Now, last but not least, you can also then leave it blank, and then it will take into consideration the rest of the entire macro to determine what icon and tooltip to show. There could be parameters involved, right? So to give you an idea, if I then leave that first line blank and just do hashtag show tooltip, but then do /cast slam, then it'll use slam, but then show the tooltip for slam as well. Now, then it will also do Bloodthirst as an example. If I update that bad boy, can't spell again, there you go, immediately updates the icon and tooltip respectively. It'll also be used when, like I said, there's a lot of parameters involved, where whatever ability it's going to cast next, it'll allow you to actually get that ability off. So now, not only can it use for abilities with /cast, but you also have /use. So /use will be for items and stuff like that. If I wanted to use Shaded Waitstone, for example, really popular one probably back in BFA and stuff like that, and will be relevant again when World PvP, if and when World PvP becomes a thing. There were the nets, for example. You might want to use those PvP nets to debunk people off their flying mount. I know there is an item that does that, or an ability that does that for dragon riding, which is going to be a little nutty. So if you're running war mode, by all means, there'll be macros and stuff that have some form of relevant ability to get people off their mounts. Depending on whether it's castable or not, you'll probably see mages, for example, with a macro that'll cast the net to screw over the other person, but then immediately cast Slowfall on themselves or something like that. There'll be some crazy macros with that. So yes, you can use it for items. Key part of that as well is for trinkets and any on-use effect through actual gear. Now, obviously, we're in a world where we have gavel and things like that, so you've got weapons that also have it, but typically it's on-use trinkets, and very rarely you might get rings or the cloak that also have some sort of an on-use effect, and you could macro it in if you needed to. So in this case, if I do /use and then we can type out Scars of Fraternal Strife, you can also, and more easily, hold shift and then left click, and that'll just immediately fill in the information from the item itself. So in that case, you can see /show tooltip, use my trinket, etc. Hit save, and you'll notice the icon and subsequent tooltip immediately upgrades itself to show the trinket. Yay, happy days, awesome. Now, alternatively, the last one, a little piece of the puzzle for your basic /cast or /use things, is you can use it based on the equipment slot that your gear is currently in. So if I use /13, that happens to be this trinket slot. They'll be numbered 1 through to whatever it goes up to. I can't remember. I think it's 14. I don't think it goes higher than the trinket. I can't remember whether the weapons counted as like 10 and 11 or whether they're past 14 and they're actually 15 and 16. I think they might be considered 15 and 16. Either way, you get the idea. The equipment slots will all be numbered. And so typically, if you are someone that micromanages their trinkets a lot, but always put your on-use trinket in slot number 13, the top one, that's typically sort of what I do, is you can then go /use 13. And even if I swapped it out to, I don't know, what's another on-use trinket? My PvP one, there you go. If I swapped it to that and hit save, you'll see the PvP icon immediately swaps to the correct one, and then likewise I can go back, and then every time I mouse over it, it'll still show the correct new on-use trinket that's relevant for that slot. So you can use equipment slots as well to help in that regard, and that gives you kind of like a basic idea rundown. So if you are using 2 abilities at once because they are off the global cooldown and they can be used together, then you can decide which particular macro that you want to show the tooltip for. So to give you an example of that, once I can finally figure out how to spell, nope, that's not how I spell macro. There we go. When I hit my pop everything DPS cooldown, you can see I just show specifically for Recklessness. However, I cast Recklessness and Avatar at the same time, as well as use my 13 where I have my Scars of Fraternal Strife. So I'm getting that rolling nice and early when an encounter starts as well. Now we're going to start layering in some actual parameters, and this will dictate what the macro does more than just the scope of hit all cooldowns at once or anything like that. Now we're going to use the example with warrior stances, and these stances though go beyond the measure or the scope of just a warrior. Stances will refer to auras on a paladin, stealth on a rogue, shadow form on a priest. I believe shadow priests still have shadow form technically. I think they do still. Druid forms, for example, as well, and they are considered stances. So that is where you can use that parameter of if X stance, then cast Y ability, else cast Z ability. You get the idea. And that's what we do with our warrior stances here. Now there's 2 very similar looking stances that I wanted to point out. So you can see here we have the hashtag show tooltip in all scenarios, just like normal. However, the first section shows /cast stance 1. So square bracket stance :1, close square brackets, you get that concept right. It's on the screen anyway. Now this will mean that if I'm currently in stance 1, which is berserker stance, defensive stance, then cast berserker stance. Otherwise, in all other scenarios, cast defensive stance. The reason why this isn't ideal is if I put this on my number 1 specifically, let's say I die or I just swapped specs or whatever the case is, and I'm currently stanceless. If I hit that macro, the first one it's going to pop me in is defensive stance. Then I have to wait 3 seconds and then go into berserker stance. Not ideal or great for a DPS warrior. Typically, if I died and got battle res and I need to get back into a stance straight away, the first one you want to jump into is berserker stance in this case, right? So I have this particular macro where the first priority is defensive stance, and then if currently in defensive stance, I will then use the other one. This will be really good for a protection warrior. So I always want to be in defensive stance if I have no stance currently active, but then if I'm already in defensive stance, and then I can swap into battle stance from there. However, for us Fury Warriors, we use the exact same concept, /cast and then stance 2. So if I'm already in berserker stance, then cast stance number 1, which is defensive stance in this case. Otherwise, in all other scenarios, we cast berserker stance. So this means if I have no stance at all, hit the macro, the first one it jumps me into straight away is berserker stance. Perfect, cool. So the next thing we want to look at is a modifier macro. So again, to bring up macros, we are going to specifically look at the example with Stormbolt for a warrior. However, this exact same concept will work on any interrupt, any stun whatsoever on any class. We're doing a particular ability on one particular target. However, we have a modifier that will then cast it on a separate target. Really important in arenas, for example. This is an example where, like I said, a lot of PvPs will have like arena enemy target 1, arena enemy target 2, arena enemy target 3. You get the idea. However, even in a PvE environment, this will be important. You can set focus target macros for tricks of the trade. You can set focus target macros for obviously misdirection, same as tricks of the trade. Stuns in a Mythic Plus environment. Let's say the super bad enemy need to interrupt, but you're currently doing AoE and targeting other people to try and spread dots or anything like that. You can still have a focus target set on the bad guy, and when you see him casting that bad ability, you can stun him and do different things like that. So the example we're going to specifically have a look at is my Stormbolt ability here, and as you can see, this will allow us to show the tooltip of Stormbolt, obviously, and then slash cast, and you see in the close brackets we have mod:shift with a comma space target equals focus. So whenever I hold shift down, it will Stormbolt at my focus target, right? Otherwise, it will just cast Stormbolt on my current target. So to give you an example, we are going to focus target this particular guy over here. So as you can see, I've got a lovely little arrow down. I actually have no clue how in hell that arrow is a thing. I don't have a weak aura that does that. So maybe that's default now? That's really cool, Blizzard, by the way, if that's a thing. But more importantly, you'll see my focus target is down here. So if I target one of these little whelp dudes over here, one of these little peasants, but I still have my focus target be this dude over here with the beautiful blue arrows. So if I then target this guy and just hit R, which is my keybind for Stormbolt, beautiful. I didn't drop that target, he got stunned, everything's all fine and dandy. So now that this guy's here, we're going to specifically mark him up with a skull so I can visually see that I'm still targeting the right guy. I hold shift this time and hit my macro, and perfect. You saw the stun went off over on that focus target. However, we've been targeting the skull the entire time. So that is an example of a very good and solid modifier macro in that regard. Very handy, really good in a lot of different scenarios like I mentioned as well. So another macro that is very handy is because of Scars of Fraternal Strife has only a 30-second cooldown. This one's a quick touch over, like I should have mentioned this earlier, to be honest. I have my rampage to specifically hit the ring. I don't have that ring anymore, so that's sort of irrelevant, but we can just delete that line out of there. But I do have it to use the Scars of Fraternal Strife, so that way, just as I'm naturally passively spamming the shit out of rampage as your rotation goes, I know that on cooldown every 30 seconds without fail, because I hit rampage so often, I know I'm doing the next affix rune of domination. So the next useful macro I want to have a look at is going to be an @cursor macro. Again, really handy in all scenarios where you have an AoE and it will cast it at your cursor rather than having to specifically place it down. It is quicker, but much more susceptible to accidentally screwing up, basically, like human error. For me, I don't like to use this kind of macro personally, but again, it entirely comes down to preference. The more I got used to it, the more you'd be okay with it. However, again, it's purely going to come down to 1, practice, and 2, personal preference. So what I've done is I've taken the liberty of setting up a Spirit Bastion macro specifically here. So you can see hashtag showtooltip as always, /cast, and then in square brackets we have @cursor Spirit Bastion. You get the idea. Now, if I hit my normal Spirit Bastion, I get to decide where in the hell this particular thing goes. So this is awesome. It'll also show me my maximum range, so I can't obviously target further than it will let me. So this means I won't accidentally, if I'm running into a pack but the pack's too far away and I'm going, oh, I want to target on this pack right here, but I'm not quite there yet as my max distance, right? This is what I prefer to run. However, you have the option of hitting this beautiful macro. That will mean wherever my cursor is, it's going to throw that there. So if I'm AoEing away and just like blasting some scrubby, easy AoE mobs, and then I happen to have my cursor over here and accidentally hit the macro, you can see it's going to spear not to my target but off to where my cursor was. Some people will immediately prefer it because it immediately cast it wherever my cursor was. There was no second click required. There was no downtime. It was just like, boom, wherever my cursor is, I'm throwing that spear down. Much quicker reaction. Hand on heart, yes, definitely well worth it in that regard. However, it's going to be up to you guys to figure out your personal preference. That's actually why I started running whenever I'm in combat. It's a recore that allows me to have this nice little blue circle around my cursor to help me visually pick up wherever the hell my cursor is. In a Mythic Plus with all the effects and shit going on, it's so easy to lose your cursor. So yeah, so that gives you an example of an at cursor macro. This can be used with Death and Decay, Rain of Fire, any sort of AoE ability whatsoever. You've got the ability to just immediately do it at cursor. And it does come with its own further limitations apart from just being at your cursor regardless. If I tried to hit this ability and I physically cannot make it all the way to that group, so as you can see here, I'm mousing over and targeting this guy, but I hit it, it'll go as close as it can to them, but it's still going to try and cast it regardless. So that is an example where it's a bit of a negative, so do keep that in mind. So now we're going to really ramp the whole parameters up to 11, and then we're going to show the charge intervene macro here to showcase really what level of depth you can go to when it comes to macros. Now this is the charge intervene macro, like I said, absolutely amazing macro, very useful. And in this particular scenario, we have an example where we always want it to show the tooltip for charge, but you can see the first line of reasoning for the macro is going to be that you're casting intervene. However, we want the target to be mouse over, so literally mousing over a particular target. There needs to be what they refer to help, which means an ally in this case. So I can't be mousing over an enemy. Obviously can't intervene in an enemy. They need to exist. They can't be immune or untargetable for whatever reason. I think banish, like if they got banished or whatever, you get the idea. And they also not need to be not dead, basically. So that's what the no dead refers to. Then it will try cast intervene, and then the semicolon and second intervene refers to that if there is no mouse over target, then it will try to my actual target. So I could be mousing over nothing, but my actual target is an ally, then it will still at least intervene them. Then the second clause of the macro refers to if that first section is not met in any way, shape or form, then it will then try and cast charge on my actual target. So target equals target means it has to be a target. It can't be mouse over. You can't accidentally charge something. And then they need to be harmed, which means an enemy, not an ally. They need to exist, again, can't be immune or untargetable for whatever reason, and they also can't be dead. So then it will do your charge in that capacity there. So this is an example where you can obviously mouse over and intervene if you needed to, and then charge if you're targeting your normal enemy. You can also use it for a little cool tricky stuff around the battlefield. For example, if I try and target my target now, it says out of range, so literally too far away. This is, oh god, am I going to save myself? No, apparently not. Let's try that again, shall we? So I have my primary skull targeted. I'm going to mouse over this guy. We're also going to demount. We're going to mouse over the ally here to get a little bit closer, which would actually get me in range to charge, and then we can immediately charge. So mouse over and then charge straight away as soon as I'm in range. So you can see examples where this one macro that I'm just hitting over and over again really gives you much more fluidity over the combat zone when you're able to mouse over an enemy. If, say, for example, one of these bad guys was about to drop a big AoE and I'm running around and trying to get over, instead of de-targeting him at all, I can at least mouse over an ally, intervene to them out, and then still turn around and heroic throw and just do damage from range, whatever the case may be. We do have more range capabilities now with things like wrecking throw and stuff like that, so there is premise to being able to mouse over and intervene someone out of harm's way and then immediately charge back in, things like that. So yeah, honestly, really cool macro, definitely well worth grabbing for sure. So there you have it. Last but not least, we have the ever famous cancelaura Bladestorm macro. That'll obviously immediately get rid of your Bladestorm effect, which does hinder you in terms of being able to do charges or intervenes or interrupts as well, and especially in a PvP environment. There's obviously limiting factors to what Bladestorm will bring, even though obviously it does big AoE damage. And this is perfect for, like I said, if you're in a PvP environment, you drop your Bladestorm, they happen to get away from you with their own mobility skill, and then you're sort of stuck with like a sitting duck, basically copping all the range damage while you can't do anything. This is where you want to cancel Bladestorm macro to be able to then charge back in, or even in a PvE environment. Let's say I'm on this particular boss here, I could even then loop that in with the intervene and charge macro, where I have a boss and I want to be popping my Bladestorm in an AoE area or whatever the case may be, and then suddenly there's some AoE, some bad AoE that's going to one-shot me if it goes off and I'm not out of the range of it. So then you can cancel or use your intervene and then charge back in. So one thing to really important to note as well is Hurricane still stacks up to the full 6 duration, even if you cancel or Bladestorm. So this is perfect for an example where you have a Mythic Plus build where you would be running Bladestorm. However, one particular boss within that Mythic Plus dungeon happens to be single target, purely single target. You can still then Bladestorm and then cancel Aura macro to keep execute spamming with the increased 30% strength from Hurricane. So little things like that will be very helpful for min-maxing. So important things to note like that. But to give you an example, we've got our Bladestorm, then we can go, oh shit, AoE, immediately cancel or macro and charge back in, and then I've dodged the AoE, I've cancelled my Bladestorm, and I still had my 6 stacks of Hurricane up there, so I can keep blasting away with some single target damage. So that gives you an idea of how powerful all these macros can loop in with each other, and give you an idea of what's going on. So again, right at the bottom of the description will be the real macros, and also very helpful and gives you an idea of where to start when it comes to building out your ults as well, whether you play rogues, druids, mages, whatever the case may be. These are the things to start considering and thinking of for sure. So thanks very much for watching. It's been a bit of a journey. So macros, let's do it. Hopefully this will help you guys become more proficient warriors. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.